Well, good morning to the West Coast and Central U.S. and good afternoon to everyone else. My name is Brad Etheridge. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for the Center for Tax Strategies and Resources. We're happy to have you with us here today in one of our webinars that's leading up to our Academy. A little bit later in the program, we'll give you a little bit of detail on what the Academy is. And Joe, our primary speaker today, is going to be one of the folks covering some incredible information. Tell you a little bit about the Center for Tax Strategies and Resources. We are not an IMO, we're not a broker dealer. We're an organization that's all about training, education, and community for professional financial advisors, planners, CPAs, tax attorneys, PNC agents, anybody in the business that has to deal with high net worth individuals, business owners, or the general public. How to become, what we do is we train, mentor, collaborate, help you create better marketing for your practice. And we build teams using our resources to make you larger than you would be by yourself, because we know most of our folks are independent, but now you can be independent without being alone. This group has incredible resources that we make available to our members. And just so you know, the membership itself is based on membership dues. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. And we'll talk about what the other advantages are of being a member, other than being able to meet super cool people that are very smart, like our speaker, Joe Strazzeri, today. Let me tell you just a little bit about Simon Singer, who is the founder of the Center for Tax Strategies and Resources. He's been successful in our business since 1966. He founded the organization primarily because there was a huge lack of availability for training. You know, back in the olden days, you had captive agencies and home office trainers, and all that stuff's gone. Simon said it's a shame to take the 50+ successful years he's had as a producer and have that stuff wasted. It's really hard to find it. So he had the vision to start the Center for Tax Strategies and Resources, and you're going to see a little bit today of the caliber of folks that are involved in our organization and why we could help add a few $100,000 a year to your practice income. Simon has written several business bestsellers. He's members of very prestigious groups such as Advisors in Philanthropy, and is the past president of the International Forum, and is the National Humanitarian Award recipient. And I could go on and on and on, but we want to get to Joe, and I want to give it back over to Simon. So take it away, Stuff. Take it away, Stuff.
Actually, you could go on and on and on. I kind of like listening.
I'll call you later and tell you how awesome you are. How's that?
We are all too old to be able to go on and on and on.
That's true. In any event, Brad's explanation of the reason why, you know, our industry does not have the world's greatest reputation, and a lot of that is because of complete and total lack of training, not only in product, which is what the industry has become all about, and numbers on a page, but, you know, how to deal with professional advisors, how to create relationships with professional advisors. We will have 4 tax attorneys at the Academy speaking because of the fact that we've been able to create relationships with people like that. And this may come as a strange aware to you, but they need the next case also, just like we do. But you got to know how to have the conversation. You got to know how to set the stage, and you'll find it very intriguing. In any event, Joe Strazzeri, our speaker today, is was trained as a general contractor. He hammered nails all the way through law school. So he has a unique perspective that most tax attorneys don't have, which is that of a business person. And he has a number of training entities, one of them helping people understand how to help people set up their business for sale, whether it be an internal or an external sale. One of them to help train professional advisors, tax attorneys, CPAs, and occasionally people like us as to how the other side thinks and how to put things together that is both legal, moral, and ethical, but financially works for all people concerned as well. So you'll find Joe very unusual in that he's got a personality which a lot of CPAs and tax attorneys don't have. I've known Joe now and have worked with him for about 15 years. I think you're going to enjoy this, and I think you're going to walk away with some ideas that you can put into effect tomorrow. In any event, at this time, my friend, tax attorney extraordinaire, Joe Strazzeri. Joe?
Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Simon. So can you see my screen yet, or do I need to do something to make that happen?
We can see you. Actually, we can see your screen. It says Southern California SC Institute.
Okay, so how do I make this go away?
Just click on the main screen.
Where is that at?
You do what I do, Joe. You call Todd.
Well, I call Taz because Taz makes all that come together.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, Taz. Thanks, guys. So that all being said, first, thank you very much for having me. We have about 45 minutes. Would that be right, Todd?
Be right. And then some questions if you'll sit around
Sure.
with us.
Joe, probably about halfway through too. I'll kind of jump in because I know you can't see our faces on the screen when you're presenting, but we're going to talk a little bit about the Academy for a couple minutes, somewhere in the middle. Okay.
Sure. Just tell me. Now, mind you, you gave an Italian attorney a microphone and a stage, and you're going to slow him down. I love that thought.
Gonna try.
Sure. Within this, I'm going to take 2 minutes first. Every time, and you guys, people who have done this regularly have heard me say this, every time you listen to a presenter, remember to understand what their bias is. How do they get paid? Where do they come from? What is their bias? How are they seeing the world? So my bias, my partner Steve and I, with other partners that we have running them, own 5 organizations. There's 3 of them. The Southern California Institute, very similar to the center that you belong to, started for very similar reasons. We put on over 250 programs a year, 2/3 to advisors, 1/3 to clients on legal, financial, tax, and counseling. Strazzeri Mancini, the law firm, my name is Joe Strazzeri. We're a mid-sized firm of now 7 attorneys as of yesterday, where we help successful families and business owners do 2 things: get to the heart of highly relevant matters, so counseling, and resolve messes. And that is the second largest way we get business, by saying we can help resolve the mess. In the areas of integrated tax and estate planning, what we're talking about today, business succession, and then family governance counseling or family business conflict counseling, the largest way we help advisors acquire large families or successful families and business owners, because wealthy families often have dysfunction within their business or themselves. Lastly, Founders Group. We help business owners with, do I keep and grow my business, or do I transition it to my family, to my employees, or to a third party in whole or in part, now or later? So that gives you a bias of the way we think and what kind of things we do. We're going to talk about the 10 ways out of highly appreciated property. We'll talk about their typical plan, the 10 exits, and then helping clients understand and choose. First and foremost, this presentation by no means in 40 minutes could give every technical bit of every one of these. The goal of the presentation is to be able to give you language and tools to speak to other collaborative advisors and speak to prospects and speak to current clients and speak to past clients to say, you're considering selling or not based on a 1031 exchange, or selling or not based on a CRT ILEC combination. Have you considered all 10 ways out? So it causes the client to say, I'm sorry, say that again, to start the conversation, to restart the conversation. So the goal of the presentation today is to widen your perspective, give you language and tools to help acquire those clients or serve them well. So the typical plan. Clients that you will have that have property, that have had it for a long time, have a swap till you drop attitude. They've been using code sections 1031. Really old dogs will call them Starker exchanges, because Mrs. Starker is the one that caused this with the IRS, that the IRS then codified in 1031, where you can take a piece of property, sell it, give the money to an accommodator, and as long as you point and find properties within 45 days and close within 180, you don't pay a capital gains tax. So I have a piece of property that sold last week. I bought the dirt for $100,000. I built it for $5. It's got about $600,000 into it. Over 30 years, I've depreciated the $500,000 of the building. My basis is $100,000. It sold for $2.8. I've got a $2.7 capital gain. That means I've got $850,000 tax that I'd have to pay. If I take that property and I sell it and I stick the money with an accommodator, what's called a qualified intermediary, looks and smells and tastes like an escrow company, and they get it, and then I take that and I find, in the typical rule, either 90% of a bunch of properties, or I choose 3 properties that I will identify to do it within 45 days, and I close on that transaction within 180. I have to put that much money or more with at least the amount of debt. I have no debt, so I don't have to worry about that. It goes then, I don't, buys the new property, I pay no capital gains tax. Your clients know these rules down pat and have done it multiple times as they bought and sold and exchanged up the chain to get bigger properties. They know this stuff. You've got to deal with appreciation recapture I just talked about. And always be careful inside of B trusts and limited partnerships, because we do this swapping, because if I own a separate property, the day I die, the property gets a step up in basis. So if my heirs sell it, there's zero capital gains tax. If I own a community property in a community property state, or community property in Alaska, if I live in a non-community property state, and one of us dies, my wife or I die, it gets a complete step in basis to where she can start to redepreciate, or she can sell it without having a capital gains tax, just like my heirs would. So community property rules help a lot. Notice how I killed myself off first. The 10 exits. So let's talk about 10 ways to do that that isn't a 1031. So we say getting off the 1031 exchange train without having to die. Client says, wait a minute, what do you mean? There's a way to do that? So we're going to cover each one of these 10 one at a time. I'll give you this list again at the end. So tenants in common.
Hey,
Let's
Joe,
give you a little bit. Yes, sir.
can I interrupt for a second?
Of course, you can do anything you want. It's
Yeah,
it's your center. I'm a mere loving guest.
I understand. So part of the problem with the 1031 exchange and the time frames of 180 days and 45 days is sometimes people are forced to get involved with properties that they may not otherwise get involved in. Isn't that so?
Very much so. So I'm under a gun right now. It closed last week. I'm 9 days into my, 9 days into my 45 of identifying. So there's pressure on me right now. All sorts of people want me to buy DSTs and a tenant in common and wind up this property. And in California, ADUs are very popular to get into these days. But I'm thinking to myself, well, hell, I lost 6% of my investment in the commission. I've got now 94% to invest. I'm going to put it somewhere. Where is it going to earn the most? Am I worried about losing the 1031 one day because of Joe Biden and crew, which is what they've got their eyes on? The pressure of this is pretty high. And older couples get really nervous about how do I find the thing, because they were happy to sell at a high market, but they don't want to pay a high market. So you're right, there's a lot of pressure, Simon.
Thank you, Joe.
Oh, by all means. So a tenant in common. This is a historic way to do this. It's still a 1031 exchange, but instead of my selling my property, going to the accommodator and buying a singular property or a couple of them, I'm going to go buy a piece of property with Simon. We're going to own it together as tenants in common. So that tenants in common is a historic way. Two people could own property that if one person dies, their estate gets it, as opposed to joint tenancy, two people have it, one person dies, it goes to the other. So within that, I'm going to be able to use the 1031 exchange rules. There was a company in Santa Barbara that were putting together tenants in common with multiple people buying into a piece of property. And the FINRA and the SEC looked over and they said, that looks and smells and tastes like a security. There was an assistant, a secretary in the office that was securities licensed, and they said, you have to be securities licensed to do this. The industry just said, you mean you can sell real estate, buy something that I can get a commission on, and it qualifies for 1031, we're in. And hence the TIC world, or tenant in common, TIC world, was born. It was the wild, wild west in the beginning, people charging 2 to 5% to run it per year, charging 6% up front, charging exiting fees. And it turned out to be not such a great investment most of the time until the government got involved, white papers came out, and what ended up happening was it became a very regulated industry. Now it has securities returns like anywhere else, and you can do triple net properties through TICs, et cetera. Very common. Most people in the financial industry know this. Delaware statutory trusts are a variation of tenants in common, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Rental to residence to sale. Most of clients that have real estate portfolios have their historic home that they moved out of that they now rent as part of it. If they sell that rental, they depreciated the depth out of it, and it's going to cause a capital gain. So they said, well, I understand you can have two personal residences. What if I stop renting it and maybe let my daughter Taz live in it? And if she does, it'll be considered my second home. And I can then use this rule about $250,000 per person or $500,000 per couple to sell. I'd have to live in it 2 of the last 5 years or have a pro rata amount of that. So I could avoid $500,000 of capital gain. Now, you either need to move into it, or you definitely need to stop renting it, not even your family, or call it a second home. And if you lived in it for, let's say, 4/5 of the amount of time, as a couple, you get $400,000 of the exclusion. It's 2 of the last 5 years. So I could have lived in it for 2 years starting 5 years ago and still qualify, or 2 years ending now. And if I want to pro rata about it, I could. So for people that are worried about a $500,000 or less gain, great way to do it. Absent losing the income, which often they lose a family member in anyways. Next, shared remainder trust. Simon, how historic are CRTs?
If I remember correctly, Joe, I think they go back for more than 60 years, don't they?
Yep. And what is the instrument often included with the CRT?
Well, that depends if it was presented by a tax attorney or a CPA or a financial planner / insurance agent, because the way to replace the property would be a properly structured life insurance policy and an irrevocable trust.
So I agree with Simon. You'll get CPAs and attorneys that will present this and will forget to replace the asset for the kids. So I take my property, I put it inside of a charitable remainder trust, which I'm allowed to be the trustee of and still in charge of. The trust is an irrevocable trust. That trust says I'm going to get an income, either a stated amount or a percentage of the trust each year for the rest of my life and my wife's life. My own life, if I was single, the 2 of our lives, if we're, or joint life expectancy, if we're married. At the end of that time, that asset is going to go to a charity of our choice. And it could be something that's guided by our kids, et cetera, or a public charity, or a DAF. But let's think about something. If I put my asset in there, let's say my $2.8 million property with a $2.7 million gain that I'd have to pay an $850,000 tax for, it would only give me 1.95 at the end. Could I instead put it in this trust the next day, or the next day, a time later that I didn't have a buyer yet, a time later, sell it, it pays no capital gains tax, and then there's $2.8 million in here that's generating income for me. Now, Simon, what earns more, $1.95 million or $2.8 million?
I'm glad you asked me that, Joe. Not many people think to ask that, but I'm betting that it's the larger number.
Or it depends on who your advisor is. But at the end of that day, I have $850,000 more to invest. If I'm investing that and I'm getting a 6% return, I'm getting some 50 grand a year more than I would have. Oddly enough, if I dedicate half of that to insurance and half of that to going on more cruises, everybody wins except for the IRS. I get a greater income. I get to diversify this real estate asset for a diversified portfolio that my financial advisor can manage. My charity is going to get money when I die. My kids are going to get an asset that they want, which is cash, more than the property anyways. We're all good. This has been around forever. In a low interest rate, CRTs friggin' rock because of the way this can cook as I take out this percentage over time and my portfolio does better than that, I'm going to take out even larger amounts of money towards the back end of my life. I can even structure it to where it pays out more later. Now, in here for a financial advisor, we're now taking a real estate asset that is not managed at all. We're converting the whole thing into AUM, and they're buying a big life insurance policy, and they'd like to work with the rest of you, and they're going to tell your friends, their friends that think 1031 is the only way out, that you're help. Very traditional way to play it. Partial transfers. Could I gift part of this to my kids and keep up the rest in order to get a step up in some of it, but give my kids some early? Yes. And that's going to be important here in a minute because there's some interesting ways to do that. One of them is a gift up to step up. My mom is in her 80s. Let's say that she has a small estate, or that Biden doesn't reduce it down to 3.5 and we kept it 11.7. So small estate or that. Could I, as G2, gift to my mother my $2.8 million property? I've used up my gift at my amount that I can use by the time I die, but I can gift it there. She can then put it in a trust that will be included in the estate when she dies. But when it comes to me, it'll have a full step-up basis. I can start to redepreciate it, and it's creditor protected, and it will never pay an estate tax again because it's in a dynasty trust. So I get use of it, I get it creditor protected, and when I die, it goes to my kids, they get the same thing, and it never pays an estate tax because it qualified for GST. Wow, isn't that cool? Now, it's sad to think about my mom dying or somebody's parents dying, but unfortunately, it's going to happen. If I sat down and talked to my mom, she'd either say, oh my gosh, Joe, let's not talk about my dying, or she would say, any way that we can stop giving the money to the government, Joe, we should do. So gift up to step up is a great answer. Private annuity trusts. You cannot do these anymore, but what we're going to talk about in a minute is an extension of the old private annuity trust rules. So for a little bit of history, a private annuity trust was, I have my property, I sell it to Simon in a trust. Simon's my brother. So we're keeping it in the family. I sell it to this trust that Simon runs for an installment note. I do not pay capital gains taxes unless as I receive the installment payments. So let's say I get $1,000 a year. Out of that $1,000 a year, $30 or $30 is return on principal, $970 is capital gains, and I pay capital gains of $970. Not the $850,000, but $300. Simon then later this year sells it to a new buyer for $2.8 million. Simon's basis in that trust was 2.8, sold it for 2.8, no capital gains tax. The IRS in October of 2006 said, for 2 years I've been telling you to stop it, really stop it, because it's a step transaction, because of what are known as the related party rules. So if you have one of these that you see, a private annuity trust, dated before October 2006, don't mess with it. If it's dated after October 2006, there were still promoters doing it, get them to a tax attorney or accountant to tell them how to unwind before they get in trouble. That's important because of the deferred sales trust rules. The deferred sales trust is a trademark term by the estate planning team, a company owned by Robert Binkley. There's been a great amount of marketing for this because they say, sell it, put it in a trust, buy securities. As you draw the money down, pay capital gains, but more money is making more money. So you have more money to manage, more income for later. And wink, wink, if you need principal, ask us. The wink, wink bothers everybody. There should be a third-party arm's length transaction. They're pretty good at what they do. The drawback is that the estate planning team keeps half of the money management, and if there's any profit at the end. In an intermediate installment sale, there are many trust companies entering this world that will allow the financial advisor to manage the whole asset. So within that, then, we want to make sure that it's a intermediate installment sale. If we're going to monetize it later, we have to worry about a $5 million rule. So if 2 years later, after the related party rules problems go away, if somebody wants to borrow money on the installment sale, they probably could. They can't originally because if you're not allowed to sell something for an installment and then take a loan against the installment, it's treated as all income. But after 2 years, probably not. So deferred sales trust, great answer. More common term for it for the IRS, intermediate installment sale. It solves for the same thing we talked about before, but instead of me selling it through a trust controlled by my brother, it's sold to a third party trust, not controlled by me at all. So you're allowed to do this. So deferred sales trust marketed is an intermediate installment sale.
Hey, Joe, I know what this is.
Intermediate installment sale. I'm
I
sorry.
know what this is. Can you kind of talk briefly about the $5 million rule?
Sure. When you monetize, if you were going to borrow against the installment note after 2 years, and we'll talk next about doing it sooner, you're only allowed to delay the tax for 30 years. At the end of the 30 years, with this installment, the tax comes due at the earlier of when you receive it or a 30-year time frame. So most of these run for 10 or 20 years, but if you monetize it, you might want to last 30 years, and the capital gains tax is then due at the end of the 30 years, and you're only allowed to do $5 million per person. Did I say that well, Simon?
Oh, that was good. Perfect. In fact, Joe, I'll give you a chance right now. Maybe we'll cut in here a second, give you a chance to get a sip of water and talk a little bit about the Academy coming up for a moment. What we do at the center is we have quarterly, and probably going to be, I think we're ultimately going to have 3 of them per year. COVID sort of changed everything with virtual meetings last time. But prior to that, once a quarter, we would meet somewhere either on the West Coast, usually Vegas or California. Get everybody together for 3 days. Well, we have one of these events coming up. It's September 29th, 30th, and the 1st, October. So those 3 days. And we're doing it, I'll show you a video here in a second of where we're doing this at, but it's a place called the Sterling Club, which is a private club in Las Vegas, just a couple blocks off the main strip. What happens is we have a huge number of our faculty members. I'll go through that list with you here in a second. They come and present. It's 3 days, but not what's really unusual about this one coming up is this is our welcome back to meeting live. So we're really excited about it. It's been a year and a half since we've all been able to get together. So we rented a really interesting place called the Sterling Club. We have an incredible lineup of speakers and concepts. But what Simon and I and the rest of the team is most excited about is we also have set up things to do when we're not on stage, because it really, a lot of times the conversations you have on breaks or the conversations you have over a cocktail reception have a ton of value too, and we really miss that when we go virtual. So for this Academy coming up, we've got a special early bird pricing to go through the 3-day program. It's including meals and cocktails. You can bring a significant other or a colleague you work with, for that matter, admin, that type of thing, for $435, and they will have things to do when we're up on stage if they don't want to attend. This Sterling Club has a full spa, a place to work out, yoga rooms with instructors. It even has its own Starbucks, a separate restaurant that's inside, beautiful gardens and walking areas. And it's across the street from a hotel that we have a room block at with discount rooms called Westgate. Breakfast is included all 3 days. Lunch is provided. We have a huge networking dinner with some wine tasting on the end of day 1. Great way to get to meet a lot of other people in our industry and have a chance to speak to a lot of the experts that'll be there from our faculty. And then we're going to do heavy appetizers one night. We have an illusionist that's coming back in on day 2 who's really, really good. So that'll be kind of a fun networking heavy appetizer for you. For more information, you can dial us up at 877-258-2837. We'll put this back up again later. Or you can email us if you prefer at thecenterteam@yourctsr.com. Go ahead and flip that, Bobby. Let's talk a little bit about the people that we have that are our faculty. So when I mentioned earlier that one of the advantages of the group is it gets our members access to people they otherwise wouldn't be able to have a close relationship with, or in some cases even have access to. And these folks are our superstar faculty, folks like Curtis Cloak, who is a premier retirement expert, Vince Tadana, who was the all-time producer at Guardian Life, Bruce Givner. I'm not going to go through everybody, but Bruce Givner, I think, is the smartest tax attorney I have ever met. Somebody you've had a relationship with, stuff for 20 years. Bruce is going to be there with us live in Vegas, and when he talks, people just start crowding the stage. His ideas and concepts, his ability to explain things that you can provide to your clients is unbelievably over the top. And where I think his biggest value is when I have to bring him in or ask him to come in and be involved to talk to a client's attorney or CPA, because he is definitely the biggest dog in every room that he goes into. So just a wonderful person to have access to. Kevin Knebel's the #1 most sought after business speaker in the US, and he talks about the world's biggest Rolodex and how to use LinkedIn to your advantage. David McKnight, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of him. He's the author of The Power of Zero. He is one of our faculty members, along with somebody that's not, oh yeah, Ed did make the list. Ed's one of our newest faculty members. I know a lot of you in the business know Ed Slott. Ed is an incredible, nationally recognized financial expert, author, and public speaker, providing training in IRAs and retirement distribution planning. Steve, I know you were there in the same area, but I don't know if we were at the same meeting. But I sat in on slots. I thought, how can you possibly do a 3-day meeting on IRAs? Every second of every day for 3 days, he was talking about IRAs, and none of it was repetitive. I was just blown away on how much content and how much his skills can be used. So our members have access to that. So you're like, we're excited to have him on board. Joe Strazzeri is another tax attorney, unbelievable. His focus is a lot of business transitions is really his kind of specialty and expertise. He's a former contractor, so here's a guy who went from business to running a business to guiding people on what to do with theirs. Super smart guy. And a bunch more. I mean, our faculty is unreal, and everybody does a section. Then we also do some breakouts in the evening, where if you want to get a little bit closer to the speaker and get into specific circumstances, they make.
Yeah, but Brad, the breakouts are for members only. So I don't want to give the people in this audience a flawed opinion of what they get. But there is going to be about 20 hours of content. Brad's going to be speaking on subject that he knows well. I'm going to be speaking probably 25 or 30 times. At least that's what it seems like. And there's going to be a lot of tangible, and there's going to be a lot of intangible. Dan Zeppelin talk about a unique niche in this industry, and that is actually giving people a fair shake on senior settlements. The majority of our industry doesn't understand that the big dogs in that industry are not there to be able to give a fair shake to the consumer. It's interesting. David Nesty is a chairman emeritus of an international tax firm, and they're going to share with us their tangible stuff and their intangible stuff. But what this really will give you is it will give you the fact that I've been able to establish relationships with almost all of these people here, Brad, a good number of them as well. And part of the reason is I know how to use them. I know how to edify them. They in turn edify me. I know how to generate revenue for them. They therefore know how to generate revenue for me. It's an interesting dynamic to learn how to play in that sandbox.
Yeah. Amen. Well, let's, Bobby, show that clip a minute of the Sterling, and I'll do a little voiceover while we're going through it. The club itself is just spectacular inside. With run of the club, we have ample seating for the groups that we're expecting to attend. Once you're in the building, you never have to leave the building, and it's going to be kind of nice to have a Vegas meeting without having all the noise and confusion of of the casino. For those of you that kind of like to go play in the casino, there's plenty of them around us, including the hotel across the street where we've got rooms blocked for everybody to discount. Because what I've heard, Simon, I think you saw the same thing. Vegas has been filling up really fast. There's a lot of pent-up demand out there. So, and we'll have of the folks that are speaking and at this event itself. It usually works out where we start about 8 o'clock in the morning. We do a breakfast from 7 to 8. 8 o'clock we start. We try to run till about 5:30 or 6 p.m. And we always leave time in every one of the speakers to be able to toss around the mic and have your individual questions asked and answered. And then we take a couple of breaks. Here's probably the most interesting thing about our live events and stuff I haven't seen in other places in the industry. When somebody's up there speaking, nobody ever leaves and goes and makes phone calls or goes up to the room for 20 minutes. They don't want to miss what's coming next. Now, part of that is that we do a very rapid amount of information. We really want to get this thing, as much information out as possible that you can use back with your clients. The really good news is for all of you that are registered, you'll have access to all those recordings and the presentations, and they'll be ready for you a couple days after you get back home. So you don't have to kill yourself with notes. You can actually get the main points. These rooms that they have here at the Sterling, high ceilings, very, very classy, very comfortable. We're going to do some of our social receptions right there. They've got a huge private dining area, and the venue shouldn't make that much of a difference, but you know what, for those of you who've been to meetings, it's really nice to be at a venue that's very comfortable and classy. So that's our Academy Live, the 29th through the 1st of October at the Sterling Club in Las Vegas. Register. Those fees for attending this are going to continue to go up, so we raise them every 10 days leading up to the event itself. So if you want to save a few bucks and change your practice, this would be a good place to do it. And with that, Joe, you've had more than enough time to get a sip of water, so I will give it back to you, sir.
Why, thank you. So thanks a lot, Brad. I'll say that it's a privilege to teach with great people like this. I'm looking forward to where we can be live all together again. But in the meantime, this is great. Even I've got 7 lawyers. Having a mentorship amongst ourselves for that is important, but also amongst our friends. I often tell my attorneys, it's more important for them to go to programming taught by the other professions than taught by lawyers. Keeping our ecosystem is bad. So hearing from the other collaborative advisors that you may work with in your community, at least their types, is good, and hearing the other subject matters, especially if you're in the financial services industry, where you are the quarterback for the client. They're your client, where you're bringing in other experts to help, whatever firm you're at. So that being said, oops. So I mentioned deferred sales trust. Let's talk about a twist. A monetized installment sale. It is first and foremost an intermediate installment sale, just like we talked about. But second, sometime afterwards, probably 45 days or later, because it shouldn't really come all together. Sometime later, so it isn't a plan, there's a monetization or a loan. So how do you qualify to take, because you heard me earlier, you cannot take an installment note and take a loan against it without it being called income. So how do you how can you not have that problem? You could wait the 2+ years. That's great. If you wanted to do it sooner, it would be through a third party, and that costs about 6.5%. So if I took let's do my math quickly, my $2.8 million property, and well, that would put $2.8 million property, and I multiplied it by 93.5%, I'm going to end up getting, let's go back, sorry about that, multiplied by 0.935, I'm going to get $2.6 million to play with right away. It cost me 6.5. Remember that $5 million rule, in the 30 years from now, I'm going to owe the money. So if that's true, I probably also have to put a 6% side fund that grew over time that covered the tax. So instead of a 33% tax fed in state California, I'm going to have a 12% loss on this. I'm going to be able to pay with 88% of my money. So there is a strategy called a monetized installment sale, which is an intermediate installment sale, then a monetization of the note that falls within the rules. It is more aggressive. The IRS is looking at it more harshly. If you have a client who's been doing conservation easements inside of their tax returns, and they're probably going to get audited, offering this up on top of it, silliness. If you have a client where this is a small part of their portfolio, they're willing to take the audit risk, the rest of their books and tax returns look great, and they do this not in the same day, but with a 30 or 45 day spread, and it doesn't look like a step transaction, lose a quality organization, probably okay. So again, it's a matter of risk reward or risk tolerance for a client. Next, equity stripping. This is the old generational split dollar. For those of you who've been around the business in life insurance for a while, generational split dollar is no new news to you. But it's really important in today's market because I have people that are worried about their capital gains tax if they sold the property, but they're trying to do some planning with their family. So can I borrow against the property or strip the equity and lend it to my kids? The rule about lending to the next generation is repayment has to be in the life expectancy of the mother that's lending it, which is a short amount of time, with the sole exception on if I, the child, buy life insurance. If I buy life insurance with it, that loan can be repaid back when I die. So then that loan that has all that time with that little interest has very little value when my mom dies. It gets a major discount, somewhere 35, 40% by the time you're done because of my long life expectancy. So what we can do then is I can get assets into my estate to get insurance on my life, to do my estate planning, whether, let's say my sister and I both did it, mine would be estate tax reasons, and it would be because I want to get money to my kids. My sister, who has less assets, would be an asset accumulation vehicle that she could borrow out of over time. So a great way to use the generational split dollar rules by stripping equity out of the property to do this, letting there be a step up when mom dies, when that mother dies, but still doing great things to reduce that estate tax and getting great financial planning in our lives. For me, dealing with my future estate tax. For my sister, dealing with cash accumulation that she could borrow against, which she didn't have before, to soften her life up. So next, opportunity zones. There's going to be a couple of slides because some of you, this is old hat, some of this is brand new. First and foremost, never tell a client you can sell a property and you don't have to go through an accommodator. You just have to reinvest it in 180 days and there's no capital gains. That's not true. There's no capital gains tax today, but there will be by 2026. So you can sell the property, business tax, whatever the asset is, take the gain and reinvest it, take the basis and put it in your pocket. The only thing we have where you can put the basis in your pocket. So if you have a high basis asset, put that basis in your pocket and only have to reinvest the gain within 180 days. To a business or real estate qualified as an opportunity zone. You divert the tax to whenever you sell the new investment or December 31st of 26, which is payable in April of 27. If you hold on to the asset for 5 years, it's at 10%, 7 years, it's 5. So now everybody's at the 5-year rule now. You generate or receive income on what you would have paid the tax on during the time till 26, and you've delayed the tax and you're going to pay less. So by doing so, you've got more money to pay it with. So you've reduced the capital gains tax by postponing it, not eliminating it. One of the nice things though is on the new asset you buy, if you hold on to it for 10 years or more, whatever it grows to will never pay a capital gains tax again. So if you hold on to it for 10 years or 20 years and you sold it, the future capital gain inside of it has no tax. We did this as a country to cause us to invest in areas that needed investment. But please don't think it's only blighted areas. There are areas here in Southern California, 7 miles from the beach you can buy. So there are a variety of good areas to still get into. But one of the drawbacks is if you do that, you are going to need, if I bought a new piece of property, whatever the building value, not the dirt, building value is, I have to add half as much in cash. So if I want to increase the value of property, that's great. I can buy into a fund. I can buy into a fund like Blackstone, where my financial advisor gets a commission, and the fund is going to borrow the money to add to the property. So I can borrow in a fund. Why is this great for a financial advisor? Because we're taking a piece of real estate, transferring it into an assets under management asset, allowing diversification without the hassle for the client. Client gets probably a greater return than they had because they weren't taking care of the property. Advisor gets to manage it. Life gets good. No capital gains tax later on. So we've talked about, in brief order, 10 exit options other than just waiting for a step-up in basis, which is what we call swap till you drop, or your clients do. The intent of the program was to give you language and tools to talk to current clients, past clients, or potential clients, or advisors to say, have you looked at all 10 options? Because they're going to know about one. So you're going to say, yes, other than the 1031, what have you looked at? And they're going to say a CRT or whatever else. You're going to say, have you looked at the 10? And that's going to get them interested. And you're going to be able to talk about lots of other things. And in many of these strategies, you're taking rental income, you're taking a rental income asset, liquidating it, and turning it into an assets under management asset. And in some cases, on top of that, insurance to offer something too, because that's truthfully a complete financial plan for the asset. This is a financial planning conversation. This is not a tax. This is not a legal. Those are subcategories. This is a financial planning conversation. So with that then, helping clients understand, remember, are you giving advice? Advice is, you come to me and in 10 minutes, I know what to do. How does my son invest his $20,000 that he saved? You can give that advice this quick. Should I start a Roth IRA or not? That quick. Engagement. The client sends you stuff, talks to you, sends you everything, you go away, you think about it, they come back, you explain it to them. Or partnering. They send you the stuff, you look through the stuff, you have a long meeting, you go away and think about it, and you present options. A Goldilocks close. Too hard, too soft, just right. The 10 ways out suggest multiple ways to look at it rather than buy my one thing or not. Remember, are you doing advice, engagement, or partnering? If you spend the time on partnering, make sure your compensation matches. If you spend the partnering time on advice compensation, you're going to kill yourself in your life. So remember, what kind of time are you spending for the possible reward, and identify to the client what that is. The complication and significance probably requires partnering at this level, which means talk to them, they send you stuff, you research, you come back to them, you describe options, you choose together. It isn't buy my thing or not, it's which of these things should we do together. It causes stronger engagements, and it creates great centers of influence, because if you include the advisor on the client, they're going to say, will you look at Sue and Mary, my other two clients, please? So it's about helping them understand and choose to work with you. We've covered the typical plan of swap to your drop, your 10 exits, and how to make that happen. So Brad and Simon, I think we've got a little bit of time. I know you guys have a little bit more to cover.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Simon, you want to say anything before I want to do just a little recap of what's coming up with the Academy?
No, to be honest with you, I think the probably the single most important thing that Joe just discovered is this gives us the ability to seek out professional advisor assistance as opposed to trying to avoid the deal killers. My experience going back now 30 years, because the first 20 years I didn't abide by my own advice, my experience dictates that the reason that the professional advisor is a deal killer is because nobody ever spent the time explaining to them and sharing with them what it was you were trying to accomplish, how they're not going to go to jail if they shake their head affirmatively, how you're going to help them generate additional revenue. And when they see that you're doing that on a professional level, as Joe just stated, you will get more phone calls and they won't kill your deals. It's important to understand that process. Thanks for that, Joe. I appreciate it. Go ahead, Bradley.
Joe, what are your thoughts regarding deferred asset sales? I know you talked about the deferred asset trust.
That's a big conversation for this call. Deferred asset sales done properly are great. The problem is most promoters that are involved with that gives you a lot of trouble. So whoever asked that question, send me an email. It's at joe@caretoknow.info, joe@caretoknow.info, and I'm glad to have that conversation. Did I lose them?
Nope, that's good. That's great. That's perfect, Joe. Thank you. What point does the real estate have to be put into the CRT to qualify?
Sure. So there's been some new Ninth Circuit Court cases that have come out. It's specific about that. The easiest way to remember is the old rule, which will get you there, called the sufficient momentum test. Does the deal that's in front of them, has it been started, and does it have sufficient momentum to close with those parties on those terms? With those parties on those terms. So if you have an LOI and the deal closes on the terms of the LOI, you're too late. If you have a letter of intent and the deal is being negotiated, they're going to take some stock back. I'm sorry, if it's a business, or it's going to be, they're going to reduce the costs, or there's things to fix, et cetera, that are material, you're good to go. So I realize that's a fuzzy rule. The IRS likes fuzzy rules because when they get fuzzy rules, they get to collect more tax. So there are many people that say, until you've signed your final deal, you're good. Those people are not going to be with the client 2 or 3 years later. So think about the sufficient momentum. Do you have the parties decided, and have they written down the deal that's going to be exactly closed on? The more time you have and the more the deal changes, the better you are. So if the LOI and the actual agreement are different, you add some time. But once you actually sign an agreement and it's going to close that, you're definitely too far between an LOI and that, or between an offer and that. It depends on how close you are to the terms. I've actually had some of my clients change the terms of the sale to qualify for the CRT because the other side got a benefit and they did too. So it made sense. It was a great negotiating tool.
So Bradley, let me jump in for a second. So when the client asks you a question like that, your answer is going to be, great question. That's something we need to review with your attorney that can handle the details of this. And by the way, we wouldn't mind having your CPA involved also. In other words, bring them in. Don't exclude them. They will not kill your deal if they're brought in and they get paid and they're not embarrassed. It's an important play.
Excellent.
And if you do that, you're liable to get other clients from those advisors.
Amen. Yep. Amen. The circle of life. Joe,
if you don't realize, I like people to get more business. I don't see doing this, doing it really well, and not wanting the next. I don't get that.
Nope. Got it. Joe, can you address the problems with the deferred sales trust, please? You said Binkley gets half the investment management and the profit at the end. Is there another way to do this, a better way?
Sure. So currently, and I'm not saying anything bad about them. It's the way they marketed. They've got out in the world. They were the first one out there to really do this heavily. But within the model that the estate planning team has, their documents, depending on the volume you do with them, they manage the entire asset, and then they pay the asset manager a sub amount between 40 and 60%. So I say about half.
Okay.
So the financial advisor loses the opportunity to manage the whole. There are other trust companies that do this, that allow the advisor to manage the whole, and the trust company charges there for a 20 or 30 bps. So to be that trustee. So that's number one. Number two, there should not be money at the end of this deal, because think of an immediate annuity payment or a fully amortized loan, when you get to the end, there's no money left. Now, if you do these deals, and let's say you do 10-year notes, at the end of the 10-year, you could always renegotiate for more time or part of the way through, like any other commercial transaction that says we earned so much in, we would like to have a bigger payout. You are not, underline not, allowed to have the individual or the family be the beneficiary of that trust because it's a related party rule. But I will share with you that after 2 years, remember this trust and this structure and this note will be reviewed every year to make sure it's performing like any other financial planning asset. If the trust has a trust protector, the trust protector has the ability to add beneficiaries. And if they added a beneficiary 3, 4, 5, 7 years later, that wouldn't hurt the structure, but it would have to be for a good purpose. If the client enters this transaction planning on being a beneficiary of the trust, or their children or their family members being a beneficiary, it blows up. It has to be, it goes to a charity at the end. Now with Binkley, it goes to them. So if it doesn't perform, it blows up. If it does perform, the extra cut goes to their company. So that is a third party. I prefer my kids be able to direct it to a charity, and I have a trust protector that could change the beneficiary later if we wanted to. Remember, this thing is supposed to zero itself out at the end.
Excellent. All right.
Yeah, one more thing. A way to recapture that long-term capital gain either today, tomorrow, or sometime in the future, and get the remaining asset outside of the taxable estate is, once again, properly structured life insurance. These don't have to be separate. They can be pieces attached to it, and it should be something discussed in concert with the structure with regard to reducing or deferring long-term capital gains, not an oh, by the way, after it's already completed.
So that'll go down to the name of the center. The Center for 1, tax, 2, strategies, 3, resources. This is a tax rule. The second part is strategies. Simon and crew don't think of one-up things by themselves. They say, what are the components that would go together, timing, combining, and sequencing that makes sense? And then resources, who do we know that can do those things together for the client? So way too often in this industry, people pitch a strategy or a tax idea in a vacuum. Notice it says Center for Tax, 1, strategies, plural, because you combine them, and 3, resources on who, 2. So what Simon just illustrated is you never do one thing in a vacuum. It's a combination of things to help a client. Sorry, Brad.
Yeah, and by the way, the people that despise life insurance wind up buying a whole ton of it because it matches their objectives and they never thought of it.
Sure.
So I might say, how much life insurance would you agree to buy if I got the government to give you the money with which to make the premium payments? So people don't object to life insurance, they object to paying for it.
And remember, I'm the friggin' lawyer that doesn't get paid for this. That doesn't get paid for the life insurance side. So most lawyers, CPAs, have no motivation. But at the end of the day, I tell clients this all the time. This is a financial planning conversation that happens to include tax. I can never beat the life insurance lobby that has made rules about how to treat life insurance tax-wise. I can't beat that. If you make something not get income tax and not get estate tax, there's no way I can invest to outperform it, even if it performs very little in there without the stripping of all the taxes. Every year income and on the estate tax, there's no legal strategy that I'm ever going to have that's going to beat that. If I combine them, I do well. So, and by the way, if you're an advisor out there, go hunt CPAs and attorneys that can say what I just said. And if they can't, like Simon said, go train them. If I might, Brad, one more thing. When I got trained into being an estate attorney for litigation, I had run construction companies. I built and sold 3 firms. I became attorney in my early 30s. I was primarily trained by life insurance specialists. Where the hell did you all go? Go train attorneys and CPAs.
Thank you again, Joe. Appreciate it always.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Take care. Everybody, You got the information for the academy. It comes down to about $22 an hour for people that are making $800, $900, $1,000 an hour, such as Joe Strazzeri and Bruce Givner. You're not going to be able to come up with anything that's even close with regard to the economic value. So thanks for your time. Bradley, you got anything to close with?
I think we're good. Take care. Thanks, Simon.
Take care.